Oh, hi, this is Rob Kramarz of Intelliversity. We're here this morning with a company called Leading BioSciences, which has a number of products underneath them, such as Inflammagen. The company was founded by Geert Schmidt-Schoenbein, who's sitting to my left, and John Rodenreis, who's the CEO, and a number of other individuals who are involved. And this is a, I should say before we go any further, this is a training video for entrepreneurs. This is not a solicitation to buy securities. It's not an offer to sell securities. We just want the general community to know what really strong scientific, technological entrepreneurship is like, and what works and what doesn't work. This is a company who has successfully raised a great deal of capital, is moving rapidly through the FDA regulatory process, has significant recognition in Washington and other places for their outstanding research and what it's going to mean to the country and the world. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of what it took to create this kind of company. So before we go any further, I'd like to take a minute for each of you to tell us what Leading BioSciences does in your own words. I know you have different points of view, so...
Okay, why don't I start then? We're a product development company, and what we do is we search for technologies that are going to be disruptive. So I'll patrol the halls of UCSD and try to find people like Kerry, who've got a technology that can really change a market and save a lot of lives, and yet he doesn't know how to relate to the business world. So we'll in-license that from the university or a federal lab. We'll put enough money in it to get it through animal testing and then initial human testing. And then we'll find a partner, a big pharma or big device company, to move it into the clinic.
From my point of view, this is an enterprise in which many years of very generous NIH support, the participation of very talented bioengineering students at the university, have culminated in an understanding of an important health problem that we now like to translate into human use. Yeah. And we understand today enough of the process that we feel confident it's time to see whether we can help some people in the public.
Now, just to brief you on the actual technology, take a moment to tell us what Inflammagen, what your discovery was, and what the product hopes to do in the human population.
The process that we are interested in is a terrible medical problem. It's called shock and multi-organ failure. And it's a situation when the patient is in an intensive care unit and the physician observes that he's progressively going from one problem to the next one. And let's say the lung doesn't work very well anymore. It's because he's accumulating water in the lung. Or the kidney doesn't work anymore. Once multiple of these organs fail, then at that particular point there is a good chance that the patient will not be able to leave that intensive care unit. What we have discovered is a mechanism that leads into this progression of organ failure. And it has to do with the intestine. And specifically it has to do with the digestive enzymes in our intestine that we have as a fact of life. And these digestive enzymes, under normal circumstances, have to be very carefully compartmentalized. They're supposed to be in the lumen of the intestine, but not elsewhere. And what we discovered over the years, and were able to document in experimental situations, is that that process is disrupted. And there is a possibility that, in fact, the patient, as we call it, may go into autodigestion. In other words, these digestive enzymes suddenly start to digest the patient's own intestine, and that leads to the demise.
Yes. Interesting.
And so from a technology point of view, the question is there a possibility that if we block the digestive enzymes in the intestine in a very deliberate way, in a controlled way, while we maintain the patient otherwise, can we possibly, in fact, interfere with this process and possibly save a life?
Interesting. Now, John, how does this translate into a product or products that the FDA would approve and the public would benefit from?
Okay. Well, the beauty of what Geert found is that, pharma companies have spent billions of dollars on multi-organ failure, and they've always looked at the symptoms and tried to alleviate the symptoms. So they've created all these new compounds, and the most famous one is called Xigris from Eli Lilly. It's a activated C compound that doesn't treat the mechanism. So it was approved by the FDA. It increases survival by 6%. It costs $6,000 a dose. So it's a very expensive drug. They pulled it from the market last week because it doesn't work.
Wow.
So there's no effective treatment. And all the pharma companies were focused on, let's find an IV formulation that'll work, or let's find oral solids that'll work. Nothing's worked. So Geert said, what could possibly cause multi-organ failure? What organ? And he finally zeroed in on the intestine. So the simplicity of this is we're not talking a new drug. What we do is we take a currently approved drug that's already on the market, it's generic.
Yes.
We put it in the stomach, and it blocks these digestive enzymes. And we've had dramatic success in his lab. He's improved survival from about 20% to about 85%.
In animal testing.
In animal testing. We're talking hundreds of rats and lots of pigs.
Now, what about the testing in Taiwan? How did that go?
As we obtained all these animal results, then of course I started to talk to physicians about it. And I happened to meet a heart transplant surgeon who is working in Taipei and asked me, he learned about it, read about it, and he then asked me, could you please come and visit? And I did so. I gave a very detailed seminar to him and his team, and we talked about this idea. And he's a person who has a lot of detailed feeling on what happens in humans, okay? And he said, this is all very plausible, but nobody has ever tested this in man. And it just happened so that on that particular occasion I was there, a patient was admitted to the hospital who was in dire shapes and really in a very serious situation. And the physician who had to take care of this individual recognized that there was really no other option. So it is fortunate that in Taiwan there is a drug approved for a very different indication that works well to block these digestive enzymes. And the result was that they decided on the evening I was there, let's try this out. They got consent from the loved ones, and they started to treat, and they started to see the first time a response to this. And this particular individual has been improved. This turns out to be a male. He was then discharged into a care unit, and he was released from the hospital a few months later. And he's alive today, and he's doing well. So this was the first anecdotal evidence we had for that in a pretty extreme case, I have to say. And now this group, clinical group, obviously is looking at this as a potential to help certain types of patients. And indeed, they have been going forward in the meantime, entirely on a consent basis.
Sure.
And they adhere very strictly to FDA rules. They're very religious about that, actually. And what they want to do is now take this idea, literally go from a phase 1 trial, in other words, this drug doesn't really kill anybody, per se, want to now carry out a formal clinical trial, and they're designing a clinical trial so that they can actually test this on some of their most severely ill patients.
Wow. What is the potential? Let's assume everything works, that it really works as well as we hope it will. How many lives could this save worldwide annually?
We're not going to save every life. That's completely out of the discussion. The question is, how many people suffer from this autodigestion? Nobody in the world knows this at this particular point. Judging from a more general argument, there is a large number of patients who are admitted into intensive care units, and they're under 40, accidents and so on. Those are young individuals, pretty healthy, and just happened to run into a problem that then started to involve the intestine. Those are, for example, a class of individuals that are potentially benefiting from a intervention of this nature. In other words, even though they have perhaps lots of major injuries, head injury and so on, we could possibly prevent them from running into multi-organ failure afterwards. And that's the idea. And that's, in terms of absolute numbers, are very large numbers of individuals. They're often very productive individuals in society. And these are individuals who are often the most difficult cases in a hospital. They may be sticking around for a long time, so the hospital stay, there's an expense involved in that. And part of our treatment is that we would start to see, can one actually, in other patients, other than just the ones I mentioned, reduce the hospital stay. They don't have to stay quite as long.
We're going to take a short break, and we're going to turn to the question of how they actually brought this team together.